Mike, how's it going, man?
Great, man. Great. Just enjoying the beautiful California weather. Had a very low key day and just happy to be here.
Nice. What are you doing on a low key day?
Low key day for me. I'm not a golfer, but I played golf today, which was fun. I
Nice.
Yeah, so I did that and got some lunch with some buddies, and then the rest of the day, I just kind of been hanging out. I My girlfriend is over in Sedona, so I've had lots of like free time. You know how it is, like if you've lived with someone before, even if you've had roommates, like you really don't have a lot of true alone time because even if you don't have anything to do, you're still occupied with the person and what they're doing or just conversation. So I've just had the house to myself. I've just been hanging out.
That's awesome. How'd you shoot today?
Well, the funny thing was I've been playing righty for a while.
Oh
I
boy.
don't golf. I don't golf often. Okay. I've probably golfed maybe 15 times, maybe. Okay. And I'm pretty good. I naturally athletic. I can move the ball.
Yeah, yeah.
But the last time I golfed, I figured out I was a lefty. So today was the second time I golfed lefty, and I was keeping up. I was, there were there
That's a
were there
bold
were.
move, the hand switch.
Oh well, it was. I was just curious because I'm a lefty hockey. Like I play hockey lefty, but I play lacrosse righty. So I was like, I don't know if I'm either or, and it felt so natural to go to lefty. So today was the second time I played. I hit a few pars and a couple
Nice.
that were not so nice. But
Golf's a fun game when you're playing well.
yeah, I also like appreciate being out in nature, out in the sun, and it's also, to be honest, a very different. Some of the stuff that both you and I do require, like a different type of mental discipline, and golf is sort of lots of patience involved, but if you try to hit the ball hard, you're not going to hit it far. So the point is, like, it's like a art almost,
Yeah.
similar to how boxing is. There's times where you do have to turn it up in boxing, but boxing's an art. Like you can't try to box, you just box.
Yeah.
So it's kind of meditative, and it's cool to hang out with the guys. I don't get to see them too often, so it was a
Yeah,
nice
man. That
afternoon.
no, that's really cool. You kind of hit on it, right? Like I'm just thinking about what you're considering as a low key, and I know you, so I'll call it a rest day.
Mhm.
And outside in nature, like that moderate activity. I was telling you, I took like a little hike today. Um, but getting outside in nature, sunshine, meal with people, and then time
Mhm.
alone. That's actually something I want to hit on. Right. So
Yeah.
right now, I live this nomadic lifestyle right now. We're living in the hamlet of Deadman's Flat, all 277 of us in Deadman's Flats, Alberta, Canada.
Love it.
And the cool thing about it is this is like what it looks like right out my window. But
Oh wow.
we're in maybe 400 or 500 square feet, and it's three of us. And so like there's a room, and then me and my girlfriend share a room.
Mhm.
And it is weird. Like last night, I'm going through this course called Mind Change.
Mhm.
I'd love to share it with you sometimes. Kent and Heather, they
Sure.
created it. I met them in Hawaii. They're so cool. It's about going back into like kind of like reprogramming your subconscious type stuff, like true inner work
Mhm.
versus versus like meditation, which is a form of inner work for sure. But remember, we were talking about this like
Mhm.
last week. Like this is like like active, I would say.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And because I had I have roommates, I had to like say last night, like, hey, I'm gonna go in the room. Like, if you guys could like not come in, I want to like focus and study for like 2 hours. It's like almost like a weird announcement you have to make, right? Like, hey, I'm not gonna be hanging out in the like main room.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting, living with people. A lot of us do it, and I'd probably say most people on the planet do. And a lot of people they want to do it, but it does take, I guess the grass is always greener on the other side. It does take away from a lot of things you could accomplish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to alone time, like no matter you live alone, it's certainly easier if you live alone, but the world is constantly occupying both our external world and our mind with things. So you really
Hmm.
have to find time, space, and certain activities or non-activities to find your own alone time. Like for me, you know, living like a fast-paced lifestyle for so long, I had to be a lot more conscious about being like, okay, this is my like alone time. This is the time where no one can reach me, and if I want to reach them, I'll reach them. But and part of it actually had to do with to kind of the nomad lifestyle, like backpacking. Solo backpacking was and is a tremendous, and even solo hiking that's like longer hikes by myself.
Oh man,
uh
you're touching
those
my
are
heart.
like yeah, right. I know. I figured I would. They're not just beneficial obviously physically. They're not beneficial only just for the fact that like it takes a mental capacity to climb some of these peaks alone, you know, with only your own motivation. But to me, that time is valuable in just thinking and just sitting and being. To me, hiking is such a being practice. It's obviously more active. Meditation is the ultimate being practice, obviously. Um, as far as practices go, being is the most being practice.
Yeah, yeah.
Just being.
I was gonna
But
say
yeah,
bringing meditation to like whatever you're doing.
yes, exactly. So that's kind of how I my relationship with hiking and lots of things in my life have turned into is finding the meditative uh the meditative qualities in any activity I possibly could. And that doesn't mean sitting down and closing your eyes. What it means is just being so flow flowed into whatever you're doing, or so focused in whatever you're doing, that there
Hmm.
is that sense of that flow state that you can reach, that I've reached in, you know, creating music, that I've reached in surfing, that I've reached in things like hiking, beautiful moments with friends and family and my girlfriend. Like those, you can get to those moments. But it's the practice for me is finding it in the most mundane things that occupy my life. Like if I can be like locked in to like
Do the
putting away
dishes.
yeah, like doing the dishes, or like putting away clothes, or like driving even, like obviously I'm focused on driving, but like there's a
Yeah, but
meditative side to it.
there is. It's beautiful. So you talked about creating music. People say, I think I read in Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural. He talks about,
Great book.
yeah, he talks about creating versus like the analyzing brain, right? And that's actually why I started writing blogs. I don't make music like you and Jeffrey, but I started painting with watercolors as well.
mm,
It's like,
mm.
dude, I'll paint and 2 hours will go by, and
Yeah.
it'll be and not even that I want time to pass, but like I'm so captivated in it. And like I don't even really remember like how I came up with this idea. Like sometimes like I don't even know what I'm painting really. And it's not like
Yeah.
abstract, it's generally just like scenery, mountains, rivers, something like
Sure.
that.
Sure. Yeah.
But I like this idea of creating, because you said creating music, then you said surfing. Um, these are both actions, right? You need to do something. And like we were talking a little bit about like what, like what'd you do with like your rest day or with like a day to yourself. In life, what I've realized is I try to spend as much time like being like actively doing something versus passively doing something.
Hmm.
um you need to do both, and there's
Of
nothing
course.
wrong with either. But like for me, like if I was going to like entertain myself, like painting versus watching television, right? Painting your is active creation, watching television is passive.
Hmm.
There could be, sometimes you need both, right? But
Mm.
that is like what draws my attention. And I realized that playing basketball, that's where I felt like, to me, basketball is an absolute art. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And
Hmm.
like you can't come down the court and be like, I'm gonna do this, because what if someone like steps in your way? Then you need to like react, right?
It's
Like
like
it totally is
adaptive.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, totally, like a flow. And yeah, to me that's like I've just realized, like, I'm always kind of asking myself, what am I gonna do with my time, right? Like, you have this time today, you probably face yourself with that internal question in a good way, like, hey, played golf with some buddies, got some food, coming home to an empty house. I can do anything, right? Like,
Mhm.
what do I do? It's a beautiful question.
Yeah, it's it's funny because like when you brought up, I had this thought this week, or maybe it was last week, about watching television, for instance, right? And I sat there and this is kind of like this is like the way my brain has been working for quite a long time at this point, is not analyzing things in a way of negative or positive, just like observing. And so I was like sitting, we were watching TV, I think it was Game of Thrones. And I was watching TV and I was like, we're watching this world happen. And this world is the Game of Thrones world, right? And in that world, I'm thinking about all the things that are happening in that world, right?
Yeah.
I'm so interactive with that piece of art because that was a piece of art that someone else created. And I just think about so much of my life in the context of me viewing life through other people's stories, right? And so I thought about it. I was like, and I constantly think about being the witness, right? And Ram Dass talks about being the witness as being the witness to your own self. So I was like,
Hmm.
what if you can apply that same amount of concentration, and engulf, not attachment, because I'm not attached to what happens in Game of Thrones. I'm just like, ooh, what's this? Like,
But it
oh
captures
man,
you,
that.
yeah.
But it captures you, and yeah, maybe there's certain parts that I will admit that cause duality. Like, I don't know if you've seen Game of Thrones, but like Joffrey is like a really terrible king and does terrible things. So like, of course, I'm like, ah, man, like he's really an asshole, like
Yeah.
I'm not really into his whole character. But even then, like there isn't some attachment. Like he'll do something, and I'm not like rumping around the rest of the day. I can't believe Joffrey did this in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
can't we view our own life that way? Like why? So I spend as much time as I can getting behind the self and viewing my life as if I'm watching a movie. And with there are tendencies to have reactions, right? And those are the patterns that come up. But as much as I can observe from that place is as much as I can turn my reactions to responses where they are, or non-responses. So whether, if I'm going to be upset about something or mad about something, at least I have a sense of conscious, awareness about it. So I just like thought it's funny you brought that up because I was thinking about that while we were watching the show. Because for a while, you know, after like ayahuasca and going to Peru and that whole kind of like transformation, I barely watched TV. Like I was like, I don't even want to watch it. I'm like done. And coming back into it, viewing it the way I do, there is a passivity there that I think I adore because so much of my life has been dedicated to doing. We talked about it. We're good doers. So
Yeah.
if I can do more things on a more passive level, not in a non-awareness way, but things that allow me to just kind of turn everything off and not be focused on anything.
Hmm.
Those are valuable, just as valuable as the doing. But the viewpoint of like, watching the movie of your own life and knowing you're the writer. I reposted something like you're the writer, you're the star actor, you're everything. You're the special effects, you're the makeup
Yeah.
guy, you're doing all this stuff. And instead of like getting caught up in it, just enjoy it. Go along for the ride.
Just watch the movie.
Yeah,
Grab
watch
some
it.
popcorn. That I appreciate you sharing that. There's a lot to unpack there. One is kind of like the beauty of becoming of the passive, right? It's funny because I generally find myself I almost look at it like I'm almost always doing, but I can rest different things. So it's funny. I had this first thought in college. And my dad called me and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Going to the gym." He's like, "Dude, your body's going to wear down. You're always at the gym." I'm like, "No, Dad. Today I'm lifting push muscles. My pull muscles are resting. My legs are resting. I'm lifting, chest, shoulders, tricep." And like, then I started thinking, I was like, that's kind of how I structure my life, good or
Sure.
bad. This is just my viewpoint is like always be doing, but okay, I go take a run. Now let's go, take a warm shower and lay down and read a book. So I'm
Hmm.
thinking, analytically. But there is definitely something about taking like that step back, right? And you're really resting it all. And there is a difficult challenge there, which you alluded to, of doing that while being aware. because it's very
Yeah.
easy to fall into a, just kind of like zone out, whatever, which that, I'd love to hear other viewpoints because I'm not saying this is right, but that I've yet to find tremendous value in like just like non-aware and passive activities. But I think, like passive and aware can coexist for sure. Like,
Yeah.
and I think it's a weakness for me.
Well, I've been, again, I think I said this to you on the phone, but I'll let you know when I figure it out. But
Yeah.
it's it's something I work on, because in developing and cultivating such a strong doing type of a personality, when there's
Like
a
masculine
task,
energy.
yeah, it's very masculine energy, which is obviously very suitable for business, very suitable for attaining goals. But in the non-goal oriented pursuit of self-realization or actualization or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, eradicating suffering from your life, accepting suffering, whatever side of that, or both really is what it is. I found that I have the same difficulty, and it's so Ram Dass says this as well. He talks about his vices. He'll be like, he knows that he used it in meditation, but it was like he knows that in using something to focus on in meditation, it's a vice, it's a crutch, and so he tries to eliminate. He goes crutch by crutch. He doesn't try to eliminate all the crutches. So if for instance, that reading a book allows you to get to a state of being that you're just in it, and like, or sorry, painting, right? Painting is a good example, because Eileen, my girlfriend, got into painting as well. And that's a very being practice. Like, yeah, sure, part of you wants to make this thing, but it's deep inner child work. We're talking deep inner child work, and
which is the best. If we could all be 4-year-olds.
Yeah, totally. And so in it, like, it's a difficult paradox, because yes, those things allow you to be, but true awareness, like true deep awareness, is presence, is unbelievable presence. And so in being, there is no awareness of the being. Does that make sense? Like, you're just being.
Yeah, man.
You're
Yeah.
so, like, the same reason that, like, when I make music, sometimes 4 hours can pass by. When you create a painting, 2 hours can go by. That you're not aware that you're painting.
Dude,
you're in it. And that's the beautiful part about it. And it's difficult it's not something you can do yourself into, really, but you can certainly find activities that get you, can give you tastes of it. My goal is to have it in everything. Like, every part, of my life is to be that in, there,
Yeah. Well, so you hear people say even things like, okay, people say like exercise is like the absolute best thing for you, right? But then if you really look into it, people are exerciseaholics because, like you said, it's their crutch to get them into that zone, right? For me, I mean, I can tell you, if I'm not right now, I've definitely been using it as a crutch on and off my entire life, right?
Oh, same. Yeah, totally.
Like, and what's really fun is trying to like push it to the edge. Like we were talking about ultra distance running, right? Just literally like train your body to a point where you just run and run. Like you can stay in that zone, and then you're always pushing yourselves. And that's why people like, they do a half marathon, they do a marathon, they do a 50K, 50 mile, 100 mile. And you hear these crazy people doing the Tahoe 240 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's it's definitely, it is definitely a crutch. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't transfer over to everything. Right. And that really is the goal. There's a book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. I'm not sure if you've read it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's my favorite book. I actually reached out to Dan Millman. He was on the podcast. I was so excited.
Amazing.
Yeah, dude. Good vibes there. So there's a part in the book, there's a guy named Dan. He goes to a guru named Socrates, and that's the gist of the book. He learns from Socrates. At one point, Socrates tells him to go around the back and sit on a rock until he comes back with something worthwhile. So he sits for hours and he comes back, nothing. Sits for like 12 hours, comes back, Socrates shoots him down again. Sits for a full day and he comes back. And what he says, to me, is the takeaway from the book. He comes back and all he says is, there are no ordinary moments. And right, when you look at that immediately when I read it, snapped me back to, I was flying to Australia once and I bought like a little magazine in, whatever magazine in the airport. And I was flipping through it on the plane. And there was a 6-page article titled Awe. And it was all about finding the awe and how we need to do practices, which can be crutches in the beginning. They were like, the difference between finding awe comes from playing, right? Like, is playing golf to have fun or playing golf, to score and be competitive? There's a beauty to both, but we're talking about the having fun. Or they were like, literally go take a walk and find the tallest tree you can, try to touch every tree you walk by, things that have no point, right? Go climb a rock, right? We climbed rocks in Malibu.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, go climb a rock just to climb right back down it. Right? To me, that's like when I'm hearing you say, that's what comes to my mind is there's really nothing ordinary, and awe and curiosity and childlike, behaviors is what we gotta embody. It's natural for us. We just gotta open our hearts to it.
Yeah, and it's what we do first, as in my life, is eliminate the crutches that are not serving a positive outcome. So crutches for me were things like drugs and alcohol. Drugs meaning party drugs, right? The application of using things to escape, but not in a way that was it was a negative crutch to not deal with what was underneath. And so, like, there are certainly people that can use healthy crutches in a non-healthy way, like you were talking about. People that may get so involved in like a physical activity or like a business that in the beginning was like filled with creative juices, creative energies flowing, and then all of a sudden they're like sucked into the vortex of suffering. And so, but to that point, like, discipline, the word discipline is valuable in creating using discipline to create habits that are positive meaning pushing you towards who you really want to become or who you truly are, which is deepened in love, deepened in presence, deepened in awe, deepened in empathy and compassion, courage, honesty, all these sorts of virtuistic qualities, which if you've ever met any kid, they're like most of the time like that, right? So it is all inner child. It's all part of that play. It's a part of not being so, cynical and open hearted and just open to experience. So in that, discipline gets you to the place where you're like, oh, that's the feeling. But you need sometimes, some people get it right away. Some people can sit down, meditate, and they're like, oh. There are others that most people need a level of discipline before they can get to a place where they realize that, oh, there's something here. And in the experience, whatever the discipline gets them, even if the discipline is more physical, if the discipline is more mental, where it's like, I'm going to read 100 books this year, all of it is almost like a boat that you get on, but you can't get to the final goal on that boat. You just can't. It can get you further along, and it can certainly help you in understanding certain parts of it. And then it becomes something intuitive, especially spiritual practices. Like, at a certain point, an individual turns from a spiritual practice to just a lifestyle, and you do whatever modalities because it's just who you are. And you don't do them at exactly the same time in the day. Sometimes you don't do them at all, but it's just it's just a part of who you are and who you're developing to become on the road to becoming your true self, your highest self.
Yeah, I I resonate with that spiritually, and I make a parallel to that physically.
Mhm.
Sometimes, like, I remember when my brother was getting into a workout program, and he called me, and he's like, like, "Give me a workout program." I gave him one. He's like, "So this is the one you do?" I was like, "No," and he knows how, like, seriously I take that, and he's like, "Which one do you do?" I was like, "I don't fucking know." He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Dude, like, I get my, every single day, cardio, core, stretching, strength training. Like, I get it in probably in an abundance just because, like you were saying, like, that's my life. Like, my lifestyle, like, oh, I got free time. I'm just going to go run. It's just top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm not that way with my spiritual practices, which to me are, I do add painting in there, journaling, my podcast, absolutely, blog, meditation, of course, Wim Hof breathing, cold exposure, things like that. I certainly am. I'm trying to get there, but I certainly like calendar reminders, like
Yeah, you
schedule
need
it in,
the
need
yeah,
to, and that's
yeah.
so that's really. I want to tell you about this book idea that I've had. I've been, let's call, writing this book
Mhm.
for 16 months now. Um, and the idea came from, I was working with a company, a tremendous company, trying to help people instill better habits into their day.
Mhm.
I started loving it so much so that my morning routine, I'm a doer like you. My morning routine had more habits than anybody, right? It started earlier. All
Yeah,
that, all that
yeah.
stuff just that serves the ego, which is like, I actually heard Sam Harris call it spiritual materialism, which is
Yeah, yeah,
hilarious.
it is. It is.
Um,
Yeah.
but I was absolutely on that road. Heck, I probably still am. Um, and I started thinking that habits happen subconsciously, right? And one of my goals was to become more conscious. So, not saying that habits can't live at the same time. Actually, that same book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, he talks about that any habit's bad. Anything that you're doing subconsciously out of impulse for an
Mhm.
unknown desire is a negative, even
Yeah.
if it's eating a salad and taking a run. If you're not doing it, making a conscious awareness to do it, enjoy the process, the whole
Yeah.
thing, it's a negative. So what are your thoughts on that? Because all right, maybe you kind of just explain them, like, habits might be a great way to get you your first step, but they
Yeah.
can't get you there.
Well, habits to me, again, like everything comes down to the relationship. So if to the point of that book that you described, if running every day is because you know that running is something that you need to do because you want to look or feel a certain way, even though the whole time you're running you're miserable, it's what you got to do. And maybe after that couple of times you run, you start to like it. Like there's definitely a learning curve with all of it. That's where it can be negative if you never transcend that. Now if you stick with something that's healthy long enough and develop a healthy relationship to it, chances are it will turn into something that is no longer a habit, is more of just something that you do in your life because you enjoy to do it, right? And you might have a moment where you don't, but you sit with it because that's being
Yeah,
conscious. If I'm sitting here and I'm like, I really don't want to run today, I just don't want to do it, and I'm like, you know what, but I told myself I would, maybe I will, and then I get to running and now I'm 7 miles in and I'm like, I'm really glad I went running. Other days I'm like, I don't really want to go running and I don't. So like there's value in the side of listening to yourself, into what you need, um or what your body's asking for, or what your mind is asking for, because it does take, in the beginning, a certain level of discipline with the mind to get past the I don't want to do this. So, but habits, they're, again, I think it's spot on. Habits are kind of a means to developing intuition, and intuition is
mm,
not based in patterns. intuition is driven by, if we're talking chakra, third eye, and your heart too. It's all aligned. So intuition is coming from a higher place. It's coming from your highest self. It's coming from the most expanded version of who you are, really who you are. Behind, the Mike and Sean is that intuition. So if you're following your intuition, that is a beautiful thing. If that subconsciously, it's actually never, well, sometimes it can be subconscious. The intuition can work in subconscious ways, but you need to build awareness to even know the difference between intuition and ego. And sometimes ego is a tricky motherfucker. And it'll convince you that it's like, if ego will just adapt. That's the thing. Ego doesn't go away. Ego just adapts, and it,
Dude, intuition.
Yeah.
Oh, intuition's like the only thing that can beat the ego, man. It really is. And it's to me, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think it has to take practice. I'll tell you my biggest defeat to ego, like when I got defeated by my ego, I would say. It was in a realm that I felt good in, running, right? The guy that's in that living room right there was doing 100-mile run in Utah. It was like 19 degrees, pitch black. I ran the last 50 miles with him. Pitch black, cold, 19 degrees. I started running just after sunset, so I was in it for the long haul, right? There were literally wild bison running across the trail, like scaring the crap out of us. And I'm about halfway through my 50 miles, and my right foot, Mike, has been on fire for 3 hours. I'm talking on fire. But I mean, I was in the middle of the woods. Like, I don't know if you've ever done an ultra marathon. I'm sure you're going to. If not, because I know how much you've been running. It's not like, it's like, oh, I tap out. Someone, wheel me to the front. It's like if you tap out, you just have to run back or walk back or something.
You're
like
miles away. Yeah.
So I'm like, you may as well run. Well, this trail was a figure 8. So about the halfway point, I got near the car. I could see like the lights of like the start and finish line. And I tapped out. And I've run through some knee pain, some back pain, some headaches, stomach issues. I mean, horrible nausea from being dehydrated running in, Southern California. And I was just like, I have to stop. So bad that at the time I didn't have health insurance. I went and got an MRI and X-ray. I'm like, guys, my foot is busted. Like, I need a boot. Do I need surgery? What's going on? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with my foot. 2 days later, I ran one of the fastest 5Ks I've ever run, because I was training so hard for this, and I was just like, so like, was that pain real or not, right? And no one will ever know. Like, I'm sure there was pain there, but that's the ego, right? I was cold, man. Like, I was tired, all that, and I just, I got defeated from it. And it's funny because the next time that I ran a 50 miler, my left knee was killing me, and then like my right hip flexor was coming. And I told myself, no matter what, I will literally not quit. And if I break a bone because of it, get a compound fracture, or not compound, like like a split hairline fracture from like just like pounding on the knee or whatever. I started going through this in my head. I said, you know what? I'm just shutting the conversation down. I'll deal with that. That's cool. If I have to get certain, whatever. And I mean, dude, this pain was like out of this world. When I finished, I was sore for a few days, but you're good. So it's like, there are times, and it's a little more black and white like with a physical activity, but like there could be times, right? Like, I guess like everyone battles like sleep, right? Everyone wants to sleep in, right? It's like, well, we know sleeping's good for you, but like, do you really need to sleep versus getting up earlier and doing something? I think the ego is sneaky, and ultimately, it's a long way of saying like getting practice in those stressful situations where the ego is trying to protect its head, right? You go do a workout, 45 minutes into a supposedly 2-hour workout, you're like, you know what? I did a good workout, right? Like, like you just got to practice putting yourself there, I think.
Well, I think it's both sides of it. I think you have to practice pushing through, and you have to practice the humility and the compassion to stop. And sometimes it is your body saying, hey, slow down. Hey, I need a little bit of rest. And even if it's only one night of good rest or one day of, not running and beating yourself up, it can be valuable. But I also find the other side of it, again, the more masculine side, it's a balance. So there's times where you push through, there's times where you kind of just have to let go. A good
Yeah.
example of that would be, I'll share a moment of ayahuasca for you. So in ayahuasca, I was going through, I think it was my sixth ceremony. It was my sixth ceremony. And, by that time I had 5 polarizingly different experiences with Aya. None of them, most people say this with psychedelics in general, and I believe deeply in this in my own experience. Not only believe it in other people, but also know in my own experience, no one trip is like another. You're really dependent on what inner storms are going on and where the medicine needs to take you. So when I took ayahuasca, that ceremony, I was going through it. I mean, there was such an intense amount of visual and physical experience that what I can only describe as sacred geometry, colors, fractals, prisms in the most dense way in front of me, that it didn't matter if my eyes were open or closed. And what it felt like in my body was I was contracting, like I was literally becoming as small as an atom or a cell, getting squeezed out. And every time I squeezed out, like got squeezed down to that small of a space, I would purge. And so purging for me was a combination of throwing up, going to the bathroom on the other side, or even sweating, shaking, all sorts of different experiences, and emotional purging, crying, some laughing. But this one, I was going through every raw emotion that I felt at that time. So it was shame, it was guilt, it was grief, it was anger. And I was just going, there was a loop. I was in a loop for, I can't tell you, Sean, eternities long. It was probably 3-4 hours, but it felt like life. I felt like I couldn't get out of it. And I'd get up to this space and I'd be like, okay, I'm out of it. And then I'd get back into it. And it was this cycle and cycle. And then one simple thought came into my head, and it feels so ridiculous to say it out loud in this way. But the simple thought was, breathe, breathe. That's it. And so I stood up, sat up straight, and I started to breathe and focus on my breath, which is something that is a pillar, one of the 3 to 4 pillars in ayahuasca and psychedelics. Intention, posture, and the breath. And then there's, I think, a fourth one that I'm not remembering, but those are really the 3 main, the 3 important ones, at least. So I sat up and I breathed. I took in my breath, and I just enjoyed every moment of the breath. And in doing that, I let go of all of the density of thought and emotion that was putting me in this loop, that was contracting me in this loop, that was getting. And I was on the cusp of getting into deep shame, on the cusp of it. And I just said, why do I keep doing this? It's me. It's my thoughts. This is in me. This pattern is in me. And I said, no more, like no more of this. And I sat up, and all the density, it all became what I can only describe as the visual representation of perfect harmony. So it was bliss in me aligned with the perfect harmony that I was not only seeing and witnessing in the room in front of me, eyes closed, eyes open, didn't matter, but in me. I was a part of nature. I was a part of the harmony of nature. And if, as you know, nature is unforgiving sometimes, right? Nature is not just sunshines and rainbows. Nature is fucking vicious, but there's always a rhyme and reason and a harmony to it, right? Like if a fire happens in a forest, yes, let's take away let's just for the moment take away us creating fires as humans. If
Yeah.
a fire happens, thunder, lightning hits, boom, or lightning hits, fire happens. What ends up happening in that area is what? It becomes luscious and green after a year because of what happens after an area is burned down, is that soil becomes very fertile. An example of this, which I'll share, is in understanding harmony, right? And understanding how getting aligned with harmony is valuable to us. And I don't mean to go down a K-hole, but there was a story about a shaman who got basically the shaman and his people were getting relocated because the rainforest was just getting decimated at the time. I mean, it still is, but at the time it was like pretty rough. And so they kept relocating, and every time they'd relocate, it got worse and worse. And so they got to a point of land, and I might be butchering the story, but basically they got to a point of land, and the guy didn't know what else to do. He didn't know what to do. So he visited ayahuasca through ceremony, and she just gave him the simple message, like look to the bees or something along those lines. So he ended up realizing that the environment he was in, which he thought was just decimated by this deforestation, he found this collection of bees. And in that, this community ended up sustaining their entire life around these bees through the honey, having the food from the nutrients from honey. As we all know, it's like an unbelievable amount of nutrients from honey. But he watched as they started to help colonize these bees, that the bees would pollinate the flowers, and the flowers and the whole ecosystem changed, right? So there's something in us that unlocked us from harmony. Whenever that happened, I don't know if we were ever in, maybe back in maybe the beginning of mankind, we were in more harmony. And I'm sure there's moments like in the Mesopotamian era where there were like these beautiful moments of like consciousness meets science meets harmony with nature, and then things and greed and all this stuff takes over. But the point I bring this up is like, I forget what the question was. Do you remember what the question was? Because the original question was.
Yeah, well, actually, not sure that I do, my friend.
Well, the point is, I know there was a point to it. Maybe we'll it'll come up, but
the journey was the point. The story was the point.
The story was the point. But I think I remember now. There's a time to push, and there's a time to be with what's going on. There's a time to push through, and there's a time to just listen. And listening is being, and you have to quiet the mind and open your heart in order to be able to listen to what's being given to you, either through you and your higher self, or your spirit guides, or just the universe, whatever, God or the creator, whatever you want to, energy, whatever it comes into your life as. So there's value sometimes in that moment of like, I needed to go through the loops. Like if I needed to learn, and and that was me pushing, right? And that was me pushing, and I pushed through, and I was like, I don't get it. I keep going through this, and I'm purging. I don't get it. What am I doing? I'm still in it. And then when I quieted the mind, focused on the breath, that was when the wisdom came in. And so it's a balance.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. Honestly, it painted quite a picture. It painted quite a picture for me, and also made me, really think about that. Often we're trying to force something. Are you familiar with the story of the Chinese farmer?
I'm not. Please tell me
it. Basically, I'll definitely butcher this one, but basically,
it's okay. I butchered the bee story, so
yeah. Well, the synopsis of it is that you don't know the future outcomes of what's going on right now, so don't try to control it. And it's not a negative thing, but just succumb to it. Right? The story is that this Chinese farmer goes through a series of tragic and positive events, right? He has a horse and the horse runs away. And that was, what he used to make money. So like the neighbors came up to him like, oh my God, like this horse ran away, horrible. And he's like, good, bad, who knows? And then the next day, the horse comes back with 6 other horses, right? So now he's going to be 6 times as rich and wealthy and be able to do 6 times more work. Everyone's like, oh my God, like you're the luckiest man. And he's like, good, bad, who knows? Some of the horses stampede over his kid and stomp out his leg, break his leg. So now are the horses good or not, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, what a horrible tragedy. He's like, good, bad, who knows? Next day they come, get his son for the army, and they deem that he's ineligible to go to the army for the big war because he has a broken leg, right? And the story continues.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I see the trend.
It's a beautiful metaphor because I'm starting to learn this, that I try to control. I mean, I still do, but I'm trying to step away from it. I'm trying to control everything, right? These outcomes, like you were saying. And sometimes you just need to take a step back and let that happen. But we get in our own way with our minds, right?
Yeah,
And
we do.
breathing, it's crazy. The most simple thing. I mean, breathing's got to be one of the most simple things on the planet. It's the thing we all have in common, right?
Yeah.
And it's a great entry point to quieting the mind. And I one of the things that I actually wanted to write down, or that I wanted to talk to you about that I wrote down was, we both talk about different activities that get us into that mental state, right? Meditation, one of them. You'd run your breathing workshops. You've been doing longer runs, things like that naturally quiet the brain. Golfing with your friends, eating out with friends and family, right? That like all that stuff. But it like quieting the mind is like, for me, that's the goal, right? That is the goal, to live like that. Is quieting the mind what you would say is like the main gateway to living this life where even when we're doing things passively, we're aware and conscious?
I would say, and again, to quote Ram Dass, and I said this before, quieting the mind and opening the heart, because the heart is where everything transmutes. All energy transmutes through the heart. That's where we feel all of the things one will feel. And it can certainly manifest in parts of your body. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Sensations manifest the way they are. Trauma can be stored in your foot for all you know, right? It can happen. But
Oh yeah.
to me, quieting the mind. So some of the activities you talked about, right? Like meditation is one of the most, and this is something that has come into my deeper understanding in the last like couple of months. So this is a relatively new awareness that meditation is one of the most supreme ways of reaching the goal of realization, quieting the mind, and allowing that being to take over, that emptiness to engulf you. But it doesn't mean that the other practices aren't equally as valuable. And so what I mean by that is, if you tell 20 people right now, okay, 20 people that are interested in self-growth, let's just say that, 20 people, to sit down and meditate for 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. There will be and none of them have any experience in meditation. I would, and this is me assuming, but I would guess that a smaller portion of those people will reach something that's meaningful, because of how powerful our patterning is, because of how powerful our thoughts are. But what breath work does, 20 minutes of breath work, especially the forms like holotropic, but any breath work, because it's active, that is the vessel to get to a meditative state. So you're bypassing, you're using the activity to get to that place of
I
nothingness or
love it.
calmness or whatever. So the activities we do, like
Yep.
running or physical, and then some mental activities, other activities that draw from a more spiritual, creative place, whether it's like, painting or journaling, writing in general, creating music, creating any art. Those are all coming from a slightly different place, but again, activities to get you into that flow state.
Yeah.
But
Which it's sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, so the all of those activities are important, but at the end, I think at the end of the day, when you're at your deathbed, transitioning to whatever is next for you, you're not going to be doing breath work. You're not going to be running. You're not going to be doing anything but being so fucking present. And that's why I've begun to realize that meditation, just pure meditation is just observation, pure observation, allowing things to come and go, observing the imminence of change, right? And sometimes you use a mantra, sometimes you use an object, like either a deity or the breath, as a physical object, whatever it is. It's just observing, like you're watching the clouds go by. And so to me, all the activities we do are valuable in going to that space more often, understanding it. And if you know what it feels like, you can certainly sit and meditate and understand what it doesn't feel like, right?
Yeah.
So you can, you're not going to sit down and meditate. And that's a whole other thing. Now we're getting into expectation, which is that's another thing to overcome.
For
too.
sure. Expectations, goals.
Yeah, like all that is futile. I mean, it's good in the beginning, but it becomes like it becomes another
You're
game.
chasing smoke. You're chasing
smoke. You're playing another game. But again, the reason I say that is, as a breathwork facilitator, as someone that is actively getting certified in many practices, including ones that are relatively active, like Kundalini yoga is something I'm looking to get certified in the next year. These are, you're doing something, you're doing things, moving energy in a way. But at the end of the day, not to say that, I'd like to just only be meditating, but I'd like to have every part of everything that I do be meditation. Everything that I do have that meditative quality, but also have such an open heart that I approach everything with just utter unconditional love, gratitude, compassion, empathy. And not the compassion that I think empathy and compassion can be confused with like triggering an emotional response. Like, it isn't always emotional. Like, I can have empathy for someone without them sharing their story and me bawling my eyes out, being, oh my God. Like, you can still have so much deep empathy for someone. It's the space you hold in your heart, and that's transmuted into your space externally. So it starts and stops with you. You have to have that. If you want empathy, you got to have it with yourself. And that's why I was saying it's valuable to say, oh, my fucking foot's hurting. I'm going in the car, man. I'm done.
Gotta stop sometimes.
Yeah.
No, that was beautiful. And kind of like, in the beginning you were talking about like breath work might be like a gateway to that thing, that mindset. And that's kind of why I don't know if I mentioned, I'm big into like the Wim Hof principles, which if people don't know, it's breathing, mindset, and cold exposure. And those are ways, those are not new, right? He has a little twist on them, and he's not coining them as new, but he tries to package it up so it's easy to follow. And I find his breathing, right, it's very active. It's big breath in, then let it go. Big breath in, let it go. Do that, and then like a retention breath. And it just, for me, it brings me into that state. Similar with cold plunges. You know, what I thought was pretty cool is last time we spoke, you know, you said something to me that because you just said it starts with yourself. Last time we spoke, you know, it was a fairly deep, let's call it a podcast style conversation like this.
Yeah.
And at the end, you know, I said, Mike, man, thank you. You know, you shared a lot. You know, I appreciate your time, your energy, which you know was very. It was a very genuine thank you to you, but I would say it was more standard, right? What you hear a lot of people say, and then you said thank you too. And I don't know if you remember, I was like, I always ask this when someone says thank you. I don't mean to call them out, but I'm curious. So I said, like, you know, like what for? And you said something that I have been thinking about since,
Mm.
because I think it's a unique way to respond. You said, thank you for taking accountability for yourself.
Mhm.
And now that, you know, that's a sentence that can be taken a lot of different ways, right?
Of course.
It
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
be taken extremely positively. It could be taken negatively. It can
Yeah.
kind of just be brushed off. Um, I love it. I love it because I believe that we're all responsible for creating, manifesting the life that we have now, and it's actually
Mhm.
it's one of the most empowering things you could have said to me, because and how it's exciting because if I'm accountable for myself, good, bad, in between, whatever, I mean, what is good or bad, right?
Mhm.
But you know, however I'm doing, good or bad, that means I have the power to affect my life, which means I have the power to change my life, right? So it's an
Mhm.
empowering thing, but it does take a little bit of humility, accountability, right? You got to step the ego to the side, right? Because you said you were talking about like holding tension in your foot, right? Right. We're talking about my foot. I'm a firm believer in, you know, physical manifestations
Yeah.
of our energy, right? And again, talking about something that'll be another conversation, like expectations will be. But that comment was just a reminder for me, the empowerment that I have and that we all have.
Yeah.
And it was also a reminder to me that, you know, don't there's no need to complain, because you're just complaining to yourself about anything in this world. Anything that comes up, right? You're complaining to yourself. But so I wanted to let you know that that was something I've been thinking about, man. So
Mm.
I'll give the thank you right back to you, that I really appreciate that thoughtful comment, and it made me think of something else, because that's how we ended that conversation. I had someone on this podcast. His name's Dakota Gale. Really interesting episode if you want to take a look.
Mhm.
And when I talk to him, when I text him, it's almost his thing now. Because I pointed out so much. He doesn't say, "Hey man, how's your day going?" He doesn't say, "What's up?" He says,
Yeah.
"Hey Sean, what's the number one thing that's got you most excited right now?"
Mm.
Not two things, not three things, not something you're happy about. What is the number one thing you're most excited about? And it's I can't tell you how many times I've used that on people, and people can't give me an answer. They can't give me one thing. Oh no, I'm sorry, not the number one thing. What's one thing that you're
One
excited
thing. Yeah.
about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah.
And because that's and then you know, and then again, going to this manifestation, we don't need to dive down the rabbit hole of like goal setting, but it's really amazing. I mean, I was definitely a little stumped right the first time. That's not a question you hear everybody say.
Mhm.
Um, let me toss that at you. What's the one thing that you're excited about right
Community.
now? Yeah.
So, yeah, it's building true community. It's something that I think we have lost in generally our world, but in the modernization of our world, in the pursuit of more efficiency, more things, and obviously more people. I mean, there's more people now than there ever was on the earth, and so in that we have lost, not everyone, because there's certainly communities around the world that are still operating in this space, like in
The blue
South
zones.
America. Yeah, South America, Australia, uh, and Africa. I mean, all over the world, and I'm sure places in North America too. But what I mean by community is vulnerability, accountability, respect, wisdom, not and wisdom tied with truth, and that's that vulnerability, right? And strength, not only in not only in the strength that we know, which is physical strength, which is mental toughness, but emotional strength. And not in the emotional strength of not dealing with things. The emotional strength to say, hey, Sean, you know what? I had a really bad day. You know, I didn't, but I'm just saying I cried for the first 2 hours of today because blah, 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 blah. That level of vulnerability is a place that is living from more of an open heart. And so
Yeah.
in community, what we've lacked, we start with the nuclear family, right? Obviously, our nuclear family is riddled with its issues. Even the most tight knit immigrant families, like my own, that see each other all the time, that have their own kind of little inner world, right? There's at some point there weren't at some point the respect shifted from the younger to the older, because at a certain point people stopped evolving and stopped becoming the best version of who they thought they should be, because it became about the identity that they needed to be about. They're
Mm-hmm.
the mother, they're the music producer, they're the traveler, they're the whatever it is. And so all the breathwork workshops, the community that I've been, and my girlfriend and some beautiful people that we are closely working with in building this, not just community in LA. I mean, this is a global community. Both meeting people through medicines, meeting people through ceremonies of all sorts, workshops on the internet, just by sharing your story. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, any of that stuff doesn't matter. It's just a matter. All that matters is you come. All that matters is you're there and you're willing to share. You're willing to be there. And the container that we've created with these breathwork workshops is so powerful because it's bred in honesty, as honest as people can be. People aren't going to walk in, look at a bunch of strangers and be like, I was sexually molested, right? That's not going to happen with every person. But if I can sit there and tell them what I've really been through in my life, I can set at least the depth of a container so that if they feel comfortable, they can. And
Yeah.
so that's what I mean
Being a
by
leader.
it starts and stops with you. I can't expect anyone that I hold space for to tell me more than I'm willing to accept in myself, that I'm willing to heal in myself. So
Yeah,
when
man.
I see someone else, that's why the whole thing was thank you for accountability, because accountability to me is looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, this stuff I don't like, this is the stuff I do like, I got to work on the stuff I don't like, and I'm going to keep doing the things I do like. That's accountability. And when you mess up, you say, I messed up.
Dude, it's simple.
It's so
It's
simple.
simple.
And
It's just like
it's
being
you and
kind.
you. It's not based off of my expectation. It's you. And you
Yeah.
battle through it and you work through it. And then you realize that you should have no expectation. But again, we won't go down
Yeah.
that rabbit
Dude,
hole. But the point is,
it's
it's the process.
it's and it's exactly like we were talking about, like with that empowerment thing.
Yeah.
First it's daunting because it's the ego, then it's empowering. It's hey Mike, you know that thing that you don't like that happened in your life that you created? Guess what? You can just change it, and you can change it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I love it. There's a book. Do you know Jocko Willink?
I
He's
don't.
he was a Navy SEAL, and he's written several books. He wrote a book called Extreme Ownership.
Okay.
It's funny. It was meant to be a highly tactical book, right?
Uh-huh.
It actually, to me, is one of the better psychology philosophy books. What he talks about is he rose to the top and became a Navy SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
Within the Navy SEALs, he became a platoon leader. Within the platoon, he became the best platoon leader of the best platoon and was sent on the Osama raid. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He is at the pinnacle of, the Navy and, let's hype it up a little bit, right? Like every kid, talks about being in the Army or the Navy. So he's like one of the pinnacles in the United States, right? He could be very egotistical. He was put on this raid and trained endless hours about how they're going to do everything. And when it started, one of his teammates committed friendly fire and killed one of his closest leaders. He went ballistic on him, going crazy. How many times do we practice this? Blah, 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 blah. Went home, called his boss, right? Told him all this stuff about how this guy messed up, blah, blah. Came in the next day and sat everybody down. And he said, I'm sorry about what happened yesterday. It is 100% my fault. And then there's like a complete 180. And people are like, what? Like, you didn't people started, instead of being mad at him for reacting like that, started taking a side. You didn't shoot him. Don't take this on you. And he's like, no. I'm the leader. It was my fault. Right? Like, and the book goes and talks about when we're in this, especially when we're in communities, organizations, right? When we're interacting with other people, relationships is probably the best word I could use.
Yeah.
Imagine if everyone took extreme ownership. Imagine Mike, you and me moved in together and we started getting angry about this, and this. But then we both decided anytime anything happens, like this is going on in our own heads, we're the one responsible. The house is messy, I'm responsible. This didn't get paid, I'm responsible. Even though you're the one that's supposed to pay it, of course I'm responsible. I could have made it easier for you. I could have reminded you. I could have showed you how. Like there's almost always something that you can do. And it just makes me, think about that. Definitely, it's a quick read, Extreme Ownership. Check it out.
Yeah, I will. I definitely will.
If you get a second. But I did want to mention what you said, community. It's one of those things that I think people yearn for. You talk about blue zones, right? You always see that people that live in blue zones live with family, eat with friends and family, all those things. And it does take vulnerability and humility and all that stuff that you described well. We don't need to go into that. I heard a recent character trait that I think goes well with community. I want to hear what your thought. And a lot of people talk about being candid, right? Having candor. The character trait was kind candor. Because I think if you're going to deliver a candid message, sometimes it's the right thing to do. Maybe you mentioned, I'll use you as an example. You mentioned that you're dealing with alcohol before. Maybe it's, hey, Mike, man, I really don't think drinking is in the best interest for you, right? Being kind with candor is the challenge. It's almost polarizing, right? But it can be done. And I think that's a trait for people to work on. And going back to Dan Millman, who I had on this podcast, I think a great way to work on things is just to do things. He mentioned, I can't tell you, hey, Mike, feel happy, but I can tell you to behave as a happy person would behave, right? Smile, right? If you're, smile, relax, take a deep breath, things like that. So as I'm hearing these things that you're telling me, vulnerability, maybe I don't feel vulnerable. That's okay. I'm going to behave. That's one of the big things I heard from you today. And that's one of my takeaways is I'm going to behave vulnerably, right? And see what comes of that. Right. And I'm sure over time it becomes that habit and then it becomes part of your intuition, right?
Yeah. Well, it's tricky. And this is why it's tricky. When you start to be honest with yourself and candid with yourself, and you start to emit that externally, even if it's from love, it can hurt other people. And no matter how much kindness you put behind words, there's a level of you can't control what other people's reactions are. But I will say that the more that you can build and cultivate your awareness to feel into where those words are coming from, to know that they're coming from the heart, to say them. And if they are coming from the heart, they will naturally come out a certain way. But saying something slow and calm is not always something coming from the heart. Okay. So
Could be the opposite.
it could be the opposite, but it's knowing the difference and why you're saying it. Are you saying it because you care? Are you saying it to manipulate? Are you saying it because you're angry? Are you saying it because you're sad? Like, what is the reasoning behind it? Are you saying it because you're hung on to the potential of someone? So there is certainly a kinder way to use your words. And my girlfriend and I go through it all the time because I'm the most candid motherfucker ever. And so, but I always try to find that place from love. And it's not perfect, you know, it's a learning curve, and it's always going to be a learning curve. But I always tell her that, like, I would rather tell you how I actually feel about something than for me to dress it up, because if you think that it's less than what it is right now, that can only cause more pain later. So I'd rather, or the real trick is deal with it myself, and that's the accountability. If I can go through what I'm going through in my own head, in my own body, use modalities if I need that help, or just use my own sort of inner guidance to get to a certain place of clarity, or to get through something, then sometimes I don't need to say anything at all. But you do get to, like, tipping points, and tipping points, it's recognizing when it's you versus them. Like, I told my girlfriend this many times. I said, you know, we struggle with she's a half Colombian, half Mexican, so ingrained in her cells is sassiness. So it's just, and I'm Italian, so ingrained in my cell is their stubbornness, you know. Yeah. It's something passed down lineage by lineage, or generation lineage. So we already know that that's something that both of us work through, you know, in certain parts of our life, and we're certainly better than we were before. But I said to her, I was like, you know, what my work here is to is to be aware and continue to build awareness around the fact that what frustrates me in you is actually what frustrates me in me. And you being whatever you're being, and me reacting, the reaction that I have is what I'm mad about. It's not what you're doing. It's the fact that I still sit here in anger. It's the fact that I still sit here frustrated. Why? There's no reason. There's literally no reason. And like 2 hours later, I'll be like, well, that was stupid. You know? So that's where the anger is. That's
hindsight's a bitch.
Yeah, it is. But
and I think it comes from awareness.
Well, yeah, like what building awareness is instead of it being a day later, or, you know, a week later, it's
in the moment.
16 hours, or no, 23 hours and 46 minutes later. And then it's 20 hours. And then you go down to it's down to the moment. And then it becomes before the moment even exists. And then before the moment exists, the moment doesn't exist. So therefore there is no anger. There is no frustration.
Yeah. And emotions might be hard for people to follow. I think sometimes actions are easier. I think about food, like awareness, like it's okay to eat a cookie, right? But did you go grab cookies, put them in a bowl, and eat a whole bowl of cookies, and then be like, holy shit, where'd the cookies go? Or did you say, like, you know what, I'm in the mood for a cookie, I've eaten pretty healthy lately, let me go grab a cookie? You know what I mean? Like,
I would even move that, I would even go further in that, and saying, if you're gonna eat the cookie, or the fucking bag of cookies, or a fucking truck of cookies, and then you spend so much time before and after suffering because I can't eat the cookies, the cookies are bad, or after you're like, I can't believe I ate the cookies, right? You're causing more suffering. So the awareness and saying, maybe the cookies, maybe I need to see what about eating cookies triggers this emotional or this reaction. And then another side of it too is, if you're sitting there and you don't eat the cookies, this is where it becomes paradoxical. If you don't eat the cookies and you're like, oh man, like I really want to eat the cookies, but I can't eat the cookies. And like, but what if I eat the cookies? No, I'm not. You might as well eat the fucking cookie. Yeah. And at least have the enjoyment in the moment of eating the cookie, the satisfaction And then after, you'll probably go through the same thing. And so as you build awareness, right, slowly, it's a slow process. It requires an incredible amount of patience, but slowly you begin to realize you begin to change the relationship to the cookie, right? And you're like, I'm gonna have this cookie, and then you have the cookie, and there's nothing to be said. And then maybe the next day you're like, ooh, I felt great having one cookie. I'm gonna have two cookies, and you're like, oh man, my stomach hurts. I can only, you know what? One cookie's enough. And that's how us as humans we learn. We learn through duality. We learn through experience. We learn through cause and effect. You know, that's kind of how the nature of our reality works. And honestly, the nature of all reality, from what I understand, is a level of cause and effect. But yeah, it's interesting because I look to food as something that I think every person struggles with. And obviously alcohol is just such a it can be such a beautiful instrument to elevate celebration, but it can at the same time be something that destroys and buries emotion, buries trauma, coping, running away.
Yeah.
I mean, distraction. It's sad. I only speak this passionately about it as someone that was stuck in it for years. So it's, it's something, but it took, even when I first started this journey 4.5 years ago, it still took me 2.5 years after I'd started to understand it. And 2.5, 3 years or so. And so it's all you can do is just remain as patient as possible and enjoy the process,
Dude, enjoy it, and don't judge yourself. I think one of the first things to learn is not judging yourself. Stoics practice Tim Ferriss is like a modern Stoic, if you will.
Yeah,
and he talks about the fact that a very Stoic principle is understanding that you're on the journey to an ideal version of Sean or Mike, and wherever you are in the journey is fine. Work towards it, but have patience around it, right? And right now I am the Sean that does have peak awareness, that does have a podcast that I get to do multiple episodes a week, having beautiful conversations with this. I am all these things in the future, and right now we're just on the journey there, right?
Yeah.
Mike, I do want to respect your time and wrap up here soon, but I want to say that for those that don't know, I don't like to do like intros in the beginning, but for those that don't know, you got a beautiful music career, which I'm proud of. And one of the last times we got like really good time together was you had like a little 2 or 3 day trip around the Northeast, like Philly and New York, and I had a blast. But I do, it was big. We were partying, right? We were drinking Jaeger, taking shots, whatever. We were out super late, and I love that version of you. I love this version of you. I'm just, it's just so cool to be a little bit of a part of the journey, to see, what's going on. And, man, I am glad that our paths naturally cross quite a bit. And, I hope it continues. I'll promise you 2 things. This year, I'm coming to see you for a few days.
Love it.
And we're going on an Aya trip whenever it works in both of our schedules.
Well, first off, thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you for your time and putting in the time into yourself and putting into the time into always evolving, because that's that path that we're already naturally on will always naturally bring people like you and us together. So we really owe it to ourselves, but something even larger than that we were meant to be on this podcast, and in the future to go on this trip to Peru and building community and continuing to grow individually and as a collective. So and yeah, I'm excited too. I'd love to have you here. We have like a beautiful sanctuary. I I got an ice plunge, I got the steam room, I got a yoga room and a meditation
Mm.
room. We do breath work here all the time. It's beautiful, it's very peaceful, and it's a very welcoming space to go a little deeper into yourself. So and plus all the hikes and stuff that are all around the area. It's wonderful.
Oh my
But
God.
thank
Can't
you
wait.
so much. Thank you so much for having me on and just chatting. It's awesome to finally be able to catch up and to see your growth too. I was literally I don't know who I was talking to. I think it was Rob about this, and I thought about probably around the same time you were thinking about the last time we saw each other versus obviously the last time we spoke, which was just last week. And I was talking to Rob, and I was like, man, like I can't help but feel proud to be speaking with you in the way that we are, because even though we had good conversations then, like you've evolved and grown up into be such an amazing person. So the
I
things that
appreciate
you've
that.
accomplished, even the like drive to be the best version of yourself and to talk to others that are doing this themselves is amazing. So thank you for everything.
Dude, I really appreciate that. I hear how genuine it is. And I like that you kind of changed up your words, because you said all you've accomplished. And you're like, actually, just the drive to be the best version of yourself. And, that's all. I'll end it on something light. Is I saw Bill Burr doing some comedy, right? He's from Boston, right? Throws out fucking F bombs and everything, whatever. And he has this saying, I've heard him say it multiple times. Like, I don't care if you're an asshole, but if you're not working on yourself, then fuck you. And I'm the same way, man. Like, really, if I learned this. I learned this through coaches in sports. That my coach Griffin was my high school basketball coach. He passed away just after I graduated, and he was objectively tougher on me than anybody. I mean, so I played football, basketball, and lacrosse. Football and lacrosse, you're far away. You have a helmet on. It's less personal. Basketball, my dad's sitting 12 feet behind. In basketball, you usually let the starters run, first 8 minutes, first full quarter. Sometimes in high school, if you don't have subs, first half. He pulls me out 2 minutes into this game, and as loud as he could possibly yell, turning around, looking at my dad, he goes, but like looking at my dad, but like not talking to him, talking to
Yeah.
me. He goes, Sean, I pulled you out of the game because you suck at basketball. And I was like, whoa. And after the game, I said, Coach, what'd you mean by that? I wasn't mad at him, but like there was something behind it. And he's like, if I'm coaching you hard, I want the best for you, right? And otherwise I'd quit on you. And that story, I mean, so many things about him. He was the same guy that we would run sprints 16 times across the court in under a minute. There was a day I beat everybody, and I ran a 17th, which means you get to stop with like 4 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
And I started coasting at the end. I mean, I was flying. And one good thing about him being passed away is I could say this and he'll never get in any trouble. He took his cell phone and chucked it at me and hit me hard with it. And I was like, what happened? He's like, why did you slow up? I was like, Coach, we were supposed to run 16. I ran 17. I had 4 or 5 seconds to relax, get water, And he was like, oh, wow. You beat these guys who also suck and don't push themselves hard in a little race. You're the best basketball player ever. Good job. And those two stories, I just realized I was like, doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, you see LeBron James wins 5 championships. He's back working to win his 6th, right? Because it's not about the goal. It's about the constant work,
Well, I
And
I would even say, like, in the context of that story, like it is all on the context of what you're working towards and what part of you're working at. So like, to me, that mentality I never struggled with, because I always push myself, whether it's competitively with myself or with others. There's always been some layer of that going on. But there's also something that I think has creeped in with me that I think is part of that being that I think you and I have discussed has been harder to cultivate is there's something beautiful in accepting people for how fucked up they are and how they're not doing anything about it. And that's the hardest part of all this work. Cause I can sit here and be like, yo, Sean, you're the fucking man. You're working on yourself. Like, but it's like accepting those that aren't
That is
necessarily
hard, especially if it's
necessarily
family or
yeah, and
friends
there's
or
so many of that, right? Like, so the work is in appreciating that side of you. The work is in appreciating, not only in appreciating that side of you and others that are like doing the work. Like you're fucking angry, but you're like going to a therapist, or you're like meditating, whatever it is. Like you're reading books about anger. Like that's amazing. Like, but
yeah.
the real work, spiritually at least, right? Uh, is looking at, you know, your close relative who is like crippling addicted to alcohol and like, you know, cheats and all this other stuff that's happening, and you're just like, I'm not
I
gonna
love you.
hang out. I'm not gonna hang out with you a lot, but you know, I love you. You're
Yeah.
broken, and you know what? You are on your path. Back to the thing you said, you're on your path. It just doesn't look like what I think it should look like.
Yeah. Which
Um,
comes back to like judging, and it's a complex, this inner work's complex thing, man. Don't judge
yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
Everybody smile, thumbs up. Everyone's doing great, man. I mean, that gives me, you know, a lot to think about. That same book I've quoted now twice. I quoted a third time, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, said
yeah,
the hardest people to love need to love the most.
exactly.
Um,
And
and you
it's
know,
like,
something
yeah,
I could
continue.
work
Sorry.
on.
Yeah,
No,
well,
it's
it's
just
like,
something
you
I could
know,
work on.
it's like your coach, for instance, saw in you that you had the capacity to push further. But the individuals later in life, or even in that moment, that needed the love and appreciation for not being as good as you, are the ones that were in the back of the line. And so there's value on both sides of it. If I hadn't been pushed in the same way you were by my environment, I wouldn't be who I am today, working on loving those that aren't pushing themselves. So it's like it's all paradoxical. It's all just like if you're like the best at being, you're trying to do. And if you're doing a lot, you're trying to be. And it's just this whole thing that like nothing's
But
wrong or right. It just is.
enjoy it, and everyone needs to keep, you know, just keep their judgments to the side. I think that'll help everybody out.
Yeah, closing the mind and open their, not closing the mind, quieting the mind and opening the heart. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
can't wait till we can work on that together, man.
me too,
I'll
man.
tell
I'm
you,
excited.
peace, love, and happiness your way.
You too, my friend. You too.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.